You've been there before. She laughs at your jokes. She remembers small details about you. She lingers when conversation should be over. She responds to your texts, not instantly, but consistently. And yet, nothing happens. Weeks go by, sometimes months, and eventually she starts pulling away. Suddenly she's busy. Suddenly the warmth cools. Suddenly you're left wondering what you did wrong, or worse, if you imagined the connection at all. Here's the uncomfortable truth most men don't hear until it's too late. She wasn't waiting for you to impress her more. She was waiting for you to ask. And no, she was never going to say that directly. Most men think attraction grows through more conversations, more emotional bonding, more time. But female attraction doesn't work like a savings account where patience earns interest. It works in windows, and when those windows close, they rarely reopen the same way. If you've ever thought, I didn't want to rush things. If you've ever told yourself, I just need one more sign. If you've ever watched a woman drift away without understanding why, you need to watch this. Because by the end of this video, you'll understand the exact signals women give when they want you to make the move, and why hesitation quietly kills attraction. Most men miss these signs not because they're stupid, but because no one ever explained what women are actually doing beneath the surface. And once you see it, you can't unsee it. Section 1. You've experienced this before, whether you admit it or not. A woman enters your life and everything feels aligned. She laughs easily around you. She remembers small details you mentioned weeks ago. She finds excuses to stay in conversations a little longer than necessary. The energy feels warm, familiar, promising. And yet nothing ever quite moves forward. Days turn into weeks, weeks into silence, and suddenly she's distant. Short replies, less enthusiasm. Eventually, she's gone. And you're left replaying every interaction in your head, wondering where things went wrong. Here's the truth most men never hear. She wasn't waiting for you to impress her more. She wasn't waiting for you to become funnier, smarter, or emotionally deeper. She was waiting for you to ask her out. And when you didn't, her attraction didn't pause. It expired. Men are taught to believe that attraction builds slowly over time, that patience is rewarded, that playing it safe prevents mistakes. But female attraction doesn't operate on endless patience. It operates on momentum. When momentum stalls, attraction doesn't stay neutral. It declines. What feels like not rushing things to you often feels like uncertainty or a lack of direction to her. If you've ever told yourself you needed one more sign, one more confirmation, one more perfect moment, this video is for you. Because by the end of it, you'll understand the exact signals women give when they want you to make the move, and why hesitation silently disqualifies men every day. Most men don't miss these signs because they're clueless. They miss them because no one ever explained what women are actually doing beneath the surface. Once you see it clearly, you'll never misread it again. Section 2. Psychology Foundation. To understand why women rarely ask men out directly, you have to stop viewing attraction as a conscious decision and start seeing it as a behavioral pattern shaped by psychology, conditioning, and risk. Men and women don't experience initiation the same way. For men, making a move carries the possibility of rejection, but the cost is usually personal and temporary. For women, expressing overt interest has historically carried social consequences, loss of status, perceived desperation, or vulnerability to judgment. Even in modern dating culture, those instincts remain deeply embedded. Because of this, female attraction evolved around signaling rather than pursuing. When a woman likes you, her instinct isn't to step forward and declare it. Her instinct is to create an environment where you feel invited to act. This is not manipulation. It's subconscious self-protection. She wants to know whether you can read situations, handle uncertainty, and move with confidence, because those traits signal safety, leadership, and emotional stability. This is where many men misunderstand what's happening. You interpret her indirect behavior as ambiguity. She interprets your hesitation as information. In her mind, she's already made a partial decision by allowing access to her attention, her time, and her emotional energy. When you don't act, she doesn't assume you're being respectful or thoughtful. She assumes one of three things: you're unsure about her, you lack confidence, or you're incapable of leading the interaction forward. None of those interpretations work in your favor. There's also a concept in behavioral psychology called plausible deniability. Women often keep their signals just subtle enough that if things don't progress, they can retreat without emotional exposure. This allows her to explore attraction without fully committing to vulnerability. From the outside, this looks like mixed signals. From the inside, it feels like caution paired with curiosity. She's leaning in, but she's waiting to see if you'll meet her halfway. Another critical factor is emotional versus directional attraction. Many men believe being emotionally supportive, available, and understanding is enough to create romantic momentum. While those traits matter, they don't replace direction. Emotional comfort without direction often places you in a category she doesn't consciously choose, but subconsciously assigns. You become familiar without becoming romantic, safe without being desired, present without being pursued. This is why timing matters more than perfection. Female attraction tends to peak when curiosity, emotional safety, and uncertainty exist at the same time. If uncertainty lingers too long without action, curiosity fades. The window doesn't slam shut dramatically, it closes quietly. She doesn't confront you, she doesn't explain. She simply reallocates her emotional energy elsewhere. When you felt that sudden shift, the warmth cooling, the engagement dropping, the dynamic changing, it wasn't random. It was a response to inaction. Not because she wanted pressure or aggression, but because she was looking for clarity. Asking her out isn't about forcing a yes, it's about demonstrating decisiveness. It shows you're willing to take responsibility for direction rather than waiting for permission. Understanding this reframes the entire dynamic. Her signals aren't puzzles meant to confuse you. They're invitations designed to protect her while testing you. And once you recognize that, the behavior you're about to learn becomes obvious. You'll start noticing patterns instead of guessing intentions. The next section breaks down the clearest, most consistent signs women give when they want you to ask them out, even though they'll almost never say those words out loud. Section 3. Point 1. She engineers repeated accidental proximity. When a woman wants you to ask her out, one of the first things she does is make sure you keep crossing paths. Not once, not randomly, repeatedly. These encounters often feel coincidental on the surface, but they're not. They're engineered. She finds reasons to be where you are without directly stating why. From her perspective, proximity is the safest way to increase connection without exposing herself. You'll notice this when she starts appearing in your orbit more often than logic would predict. She suddenly chooses the same break time, shows up at the same social gatherings, or takes the long way just to walk past your desk. If you're in a social circle, she positions herself within conversational distance. If you're coworkers, she invents small reasons to interact that don't technically require your involvement. In her mind, she's thinking, if I put myself near him enough times, he'll understand. Psychologically, this behavior is rooted in what's known as approach without pursuit. She wants to feel chosen, not intrusive. By increasing proximity, she gives you opportunities to act while preserving her sense of dignity and control. This is also where many men misread the situation. You interpret these moments as friendliness or coincidence, not realizing she's creating windows for you to step through. A common example is the woman who just happens to sit next to you every time the group meets. She doesn't dominate the conversation. She doesn't flirt aggressively. She simply stays close, engages warmly, and waits. Another scenario is the woman who finds reasons to message you about trivial things that could have been handled independently. The message isn't the point. The connection is. She's opening the door and watching to see if you'll walk through it. The warning sign that this is attraction, not politeness, is consistency. One coincidence means nothing. Repeated proximity is intentional, especially when it's paired with positive energy, eye contact, and relaxed body language. She's not avoiding you. She's not neutral. She's positioning herself to be noticed. If you ignore this signal, the impact is subtle but real. Over time, she stops placing herself near you, not out of anger, but out of self-respect. She gave you access. You didn't act, so she withdraws. But here's the important transition. Proximity is only the first signal. It's the invitation, not the confirmation. If you miss this one, she doesn't immediately lose interest. She simply escalates to the next test, which is even more revealing. Section 3.2. She softens her boundaries around you. 425 words. When a woman wants you to ask her out, one of the clearest shifts happens in her boundaries. Not the obvious ones, but the subtle, everyday limits she normally maintains with men she's neutral about. Boundaries are how women regulate access. When attraction is present, those boundaries don't disappear. They soften. You see this when she allows familiarity earlier than she normally would. She shares personal details without being prompted. She tolerates small intrusions she would otherwise shut down. She stays in conversations longer than necessary, even when she has an easy excuse to leave. None of this feels dramatic, but taken together, it signals comfort paired with curiosity. Psychologically, this behavior reflects emotional safety testing. She's asking herself whether being closer to you feels good or risky. When she likes you, she grants you exceptions. She may tease you lightly, let you interrupt her without reacting defensively, or allow playful banter that crosses from polite into personal. In her mind, she's thinking, I'm letting him closer than usual. Will he notice? A common scenario is the woman who starts venting about her day or her frustrations. Not in a heavy, emotional way, but in a way that creates intimacy. She's not asking you to solve her problems. She's seeing how you respond to closeness. Another example is physical boundary softening, standing closer than necessary, brushing past you instead of around you, or not pulling away immediately when contact happens. These moments are quiet invitations. Men often misinterpret this as friendship, especially if they've been conditioned to believe that respecting boundaries means never noticing when they're relaxed. But respect isn't blindness. When a woman loosens her boundaries with you, she's communicating trust. And trust is a prerequisite for attraction, not a substitute for action. The warning sign that matters here is selectivity. She doesn't do this with everyone. Watch how she behaves with other men. If she's more guarded, more formal, more distant with them, but warmer and more open with you, that difference is meaningful. She's separating you from the general category. If you fail to act when boundaries soften, the consequence isn't immediate rejection. Instead, she begins to refortify those boundaries. She becomes more reserved, less expressive, less available. Not because you offended her, but because she offered closeness without direction and received uncertainty in return. And that leads directly to the next signal. When proximity and softened boundaries don't produce action, she shifts strategies. She stops making access easy and starts testing something else entirely: your ability to recognize emotional openings and turn them into momentum. Point 3. She creates emotional openings instead of sexual ones. When a woman wants you to ask her out, she rarely escalates sexually. Instead, she escalates emotionally. This is where many men get confused, because they expect attraction to show up as flirting, teasing, or overt desire. But for most women, early attraction is expressed through emotional access, not sexual boldness. You'll notice this when she begins steering conversations toward meaning rather than surface-level topics. She asks about your values, your outlook on life, your ambitions, or your past experiences. These aren't random questions. They're emotional openings. She's creating a one-on-one atmosphere even when you're not technically alone. In her mind, she's thinking, if he can connect with me here, I'll feel safe letting this go further. Psychologically, this behavior comes from emotional vetting. Before she wants to be pursued romantically, she needs to feel emotionally understood. This doesn't mean she wants deep therapy sessions or endless vulnerability. It means she wants to see whether you can hold emotional space without freezing, overperforming, or turning passive. She's watching how you listen, how you respond, and whether you stay grounded. A familiar scenario is the woman who suddenly asks, "What are you really looking for right now?" Or, "What do you actually enjoy doing when you're not busy?" These questions aren't neutral. They're relational probes. Another example is when she shares a personal story, not something traumatic, but something meaningful, and pauses afterward. That pause is important. She's giving you room to step in, to respond with presence instead of filler. Men often make two mistakes here. The first is over-intellectualizing the moment, turning it into a debate or explanation instead of connection. The second is mistaking emotional depth for platonic bonding and never moving forward. But emotional openings are not the end goal. They're the bridge. She's giving you context, not a destination. The warning sign that this is attraction is emotional selectivity. She doesn't open up like this to everyone, and she doesn't do it casually. There's intention behind the timing and tone. Her voice may soften, her pace may slow, her attention becomes focused. These cues matter. If you fail to respond by eventually creating direction, by suggesting time together, by expressing interest clearly, she begins to reinterpret the emotional exchange. What once felt like potential starts to feel like overexposure. She pulls back, not because you were wrong, but because the emotional risk wasn't matched with action. And when that happens, she shifts again. Emotional openings close, and the next signal becomes sharper. She stops inviting you in gently and starts observing how you handle pressure. Which brings us to the next point. Point 4. She tests your decisiveness, not your niceness. When a woman wants you to ask her out and you haven't yet done it, the dynamic subtly shifts. She stops opening doors and starts watching how you handle moments that require leadership. This is where many men misunderstand what's being evaluated. She is not testing how kind you are, how patient you are, or how respectful you are. She is testing whether you can make decisions under mild pressure. You'll notice this when she presents situations without clear structure and waits to see what you do. She might say, "I'm hungry," and then go quiet, or "We should hang out sometime," without suggesting a time or place. These aren't passive comments, they're prompts. In her mind, she's thinking, will he step up and give this direction, or will he wait for me to lead? Psychologically, decisiveness is associated with competence and emotional stability. A man who can comfortably choose, suggest, and move forward signals that he can handle uncertainty without anxiety. That matters more to attraction than endless politeness. When you hesitate in these moments, she doesn't see thoughtfulness. She sees doubt. A common scenario is when plans start to feel vague. She agrees in principle, but leaves the details open. If you respond with, "Yeah, whenever you want," you think you're being accommodating. But from her perspective, you're outsourcing leadership back to her. Another example is when she playfully challenges you, saying something like, "You're so indecisive," with a half smile. That's not an insult. It's a test disguised as humor. The warning sign that this is attraction is her patience. She doesn't walk away immediately when you hesitate. She gives you multiple chances. She keeps placing you in low-risk situations where you can demonstrate direction. These are safe trials. She's not asking you to control anything, just to lead something. Men who fail here often believe they're being respectful by not imposing, but attraction doesn't grow through avoidance of direction. It grows when direction is offered confidently and without apology. Asking her out is not pressure, it's clarity. If you repeatedly fail these tests, the impact is cumulative. She begins to mentally reclassify you, not consciously, but emotionally. You shift from potential partner to pleasant presence, and once that shift happens, reversing it becomes difficult. This is why, after decisiveness tests, her behavior often changes again. She stops making things easy. She stops prompting. Instead, she starts signaling availability in a different way, one that forces you to either act or miss the window entirely. Section 3. Point 5. She signals availability without chasing. When a woman wants you to ask her out, she often makes herself available in ways that are visible but restrained. This is where many men misinterpret the absence of pursuit as lack of interest. In reality, she's present, open, and reachable. She's just not doing your part for you. You'll notice this when she consistently responds, but doesn't initiate every interaction. She doesn't disappear for days, but she also doesn't flood you with messages. Her replies are warm, engaged, and timely enough to show interest without looking eager. This balance is intentional. In her mind, she's thinking, I'm here. If he wants me, he'll step forward. Psychologically, this behavior is tied to self-respect and mate value signaling. Chasing risks lowering perceived value, especially early on. By staying available without pursuing, she allows you to demonstrate desire through action rather than reassurance. She wants to feel chosen, not negotiated into interest. A common example is the woman who always seems free when you suggest something vaguely, but never pushes for plans herself. If you say, "We should grab coffee sometime," she responds positively, but leaves the next move to you. Another scenario is when she posts or mentions activities that are socially accessible, not as invitations, but as visibility. She's not saying, "Come with me." She's letting you know where she exists. Men often misread this as neutrality. They assume if she really liked them, she'd make it obvious. But obviousness isn't the female strategy. Availability is the signal. Consistency is the clue. If she didn't want you to act, she wouldn't remain accessible. The warning sign here is emotional openness paired with logistical passivity. She gives you energy, attention, and warmth, but doesn't drive the interaction forward. That's not disinterest. That's delegation. She's assigning you the role of initiator. If you fail to act here, the cost is subtle but decisive. She doesn't confront you. She simply stops being available. Replies get slower. Schedules get tighter. Not as punishment, but as reallocation. Her mind moves on before her behavior fully does. And this is where the dynamic tightens. When availability alone doesn't produce action, she changes tempo. She mirrors your pace for a while, then deliberately stops. That pause is not confusion. It's a signal designed to trigger movement. Section 4. Integration and Power Shift. Now that you've seen the 10 clear signals she gives, proximity, softened boundaries, emotional openings, decisiveness tests, availability, mirroring, social proof, feminine energy, observation, and subtle withdrawal, it's time to step back and see the bigger picture. Understanding each signal individually is valuable, but real power comes from seeing how they connect, escalate, and culminate in a single purpose. She's inviting you to act. All these behaviors are a coordinated pattern designed to test whether you can step into leadership and demonstrate intent without being told explicitly. Recognizing the pattern transforms confusion into clarity. The first key insight is that attraction isn't passive. She doesn't need to tell you directly. She doesn't need to spell it out in words. She's creating conditions and observing how you respond. Every smile, every pause, every carefully placed message is data for her subconscious evaluation. And here's the critical part most men miss. Hesitation isn't neutral. In her mind, hesitation communicates indecision, lack of confidence, or unwillingness to take responsibility. That's why so many men misread warmth and engagement as just friendship. They fail to act when opportunity is already present. The second insight is that the signals are cumulative. One or two hints mean little, but when multiple behaviors align, proximity, emotional opening, softened boundaries, selective availability, they form a clear map. If you've paid attention, you can see the pattern unfold. She's leaning in, creating access, testing your initiative, and then, finally, pulling back to clarify whether you'll rise to the moment. This is the framework of female signaling in action. The power shift comes when you stop being a passive observer and start responding intentionally. Understanding these patterns isn't about manipulation, It's about awareness. Now that you know the rhythm of attraction, you can meet it with decisiveness instead of uncertainty. You can convert curiosity into clarity, emotional openness into momentum, and signals into action. The dynamic changes instantly. You're no longer waiting for permission or a sign. You're interpreting the signals correctly and acting with confidence. This mindset shift also flips the psychological script. Previously, her behavior dictated your reactions. Now, your understanding and decisiveness shape the interaction. You become the driver of direction rather than a passenger. The subtle tests she gives become opportunities to demonstrate competence and leadership, traits she's biologically and socially conditioned to find attractive. Once you embrace this perspective, hesitation is no longer an option. Every signal becomes a cue, every opening a chance to step forward. Finally, seeing the full pattern removes anxiety and overthinking. You stop guessing intentions, wondering about mixed signals, or replaying interactions in your head. You recognize that attraction unfolds through observable behaviors, not cryptic mysteries. And with that clarity comes confidence, the single most attractive quality a man can display. Acting with awareness at this stage transforms potential into action, interest into opportunity, and signals into results. Section 5. Call to action. Now that you understand the full sequence, the signals, the tests, and the patterns, it's time to turn insight into action. This video isn't just about spotting signs, it's about using knowledge to confidently move forward without hesitation. By recognizing repeated proximity, softened boundaries, emotional openings, decisiveness tests, and the other cues we covered, you're equipped to step into clarity rather than confusion. You no longer need to guess or overthink her intentions. You can see what she's giving you and respond in a way that demonstrates confidence, decisiveness, and leadership. Here's the core principle. She has been offering access, warmth, and subtle guidance all along. If you wait too long, those signals fade, and the window for action quietly closes. But when you act with awareness, you reinforce attraction, validate her emotional investment, and shift the dynamic in your favor. Asking her out isn't about pressure or risk. It's about converting signals into momentum, curiosity into clarity, and subtle invitations into meaningful connection. Every signal she has given is a cue, and you now have the framework to recognize them and act effectively. If this resonates with you, start by reflecting on the patterns you've observed with the women in your life. Which signals are you seeing? Which ones are you missing? Then step into action. Ask the question, suggest the plan, and provide direction. Doing so isn't about being bold recklessly. It's about demonstrating competence and initiative, traits that are inherently attractive. When you move with clarity, she sees you differently. You stop being the man waiting for signs and become the man creating the next step. I want you to leave a comment sharing one signal you've recognized in your own experiences. What did you notice that previously confused you? How would taking action in that moment have changed the outcome? Engage with this community, because the more we discuss these patterns, the more confident you become in recognizing them in real time. Finally, if you want more decoded insights into female psychology and actionable guidance to improve your dating and relationship dynamics, make sure to subscribe. Hit the notification bell so you don't miss future videos where we break down subtle patterns, behavioral cues, and the psychology behind attraction. Understanding isn't enough. You need to translate it into action, and this channel will guide you every step of the way. Remember this, women don't usually tell you what they want, they show it. And now that you know how to read those signs, hesitation is no longer an option. Move with clarity, act with confidence, and step into the relationships you've been waiting for. This is the Female Code, decoding female psychology so you can understand, act, and succeed.